Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Welcome back to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. And if this is your first episode, hi, so glad you're here. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to Tanya Bjornsson. She is the winemaker and owner of Esja Wines. It's spelled E-S-J-A. I first tried Tanya's wines at the Taste of Washington earlier this year. I had stopped by one of my favorite wineries, had a little table. It was Mary from Damsel Cellars. And as I was tasting her wine, I was like, all right, where else do I need to go here? And at the top of her list was Esja Wines. So I made a stop there and I'm so glad she recommended it. The wines were so good and I knew I had to try to bring the winemaker on to talk to you. So I asked Tanya to kind of describe what is Esja Wines to her and what does she want people to know about. And she said, Esja is a small batch winery. They make wines that have a light touch. They result in lean, elegant, acid-driven wines. They source their fruit from sustainable and organic vineyards and have a policy of minimal intervention in the winery. Their goal is to produce fun wines that you want to open up and drink. And I think that is so important as a winery of like, this isn't meant to be super fancy, high end. Like they're going to be wines with some beautiful structure and elegance, but you can also just open them up and drink them. So I was able to get my hands on a bottle of her Cabernet Franc. So be sure to listen for my tasting notes as Tanya discusses making the wine and tells us more about the vineyard that the grapes are from. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. I'm super excited to chat, and ever since trying your wines, I'm so glad it was Mary from Damsel Cellars that sent me to your spot, Taste Washington, and then I tried the wines, and that's what
Awesome.
kind of inspired me to. I was like, oh, this is cool. This sounds like this is like great wine and a great story behind it, and so this would be perfect to have you on the podcast. I always like to start off, and I feel like this is kind of a fun one, and it's either like the hardest or the easiest question of the podcast. Why wine? Did you always know that you wanted to be a winemaker? And what was it that like got you into the world of wine?
For one, no, I did not always know that. Wanted to do wine. It was kind of something I was exposed to when I was a teenager. My brother-in-law was learning to be a somm, and that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that you could have a career in wine. Obviously, like I didn't know much then, but like would try some wines with him every once in a while. And, it's just, what do you think about this? And for me, it was like red or white, but kind of honestly stumbled into the whole winemaking part. When I went to college, I learned French, which at the end of my college career was learning would be absolutely useless. So trying to figure out what I wanted to do after that. And at first I was kind of interested in like the sommelier aspect of it. Really liked learning about it. I always loved learning languages. I love to eat. I love to drink. I love to travel. I just loved how it like encompassed all of that. So went on to move to Portland and I went to sommelier school, which was super fun. I loved it. I loved learning about it. And was trying to get a job in a restaurant in Portland, didn't have any experience, was kind of applying to some pretty fun and cool and nice places, and nobody wanted to hire me. So I kind of pivoted and ended up working a harvest at Union Wine Company, Underwood Cans, and then just kind of never looked back since. So worked at Union for about 3 years, went to New Zealand to work a harvest after that, ended up moving back to Washington and worked a harvest at FSD, landed a job as an assistant winemaker at Darby Winery, and that's where I ended up starting my own label and honestly been kind of flying by the seat of my pants ever since, just kind of showing up and taking it one step at a time, but kind of learning along the way and figuring it out. And so it's been 10 years since my place. So yeah, it's just been kind of like feeling like it's like stumbling along every day. And like that's kind of how I felt like I got into it. But like when you look back, you're like, it's all adding up.
Yeah, I feel like as you're going through the process, you're like, I couldn't tell you that like this was for sure. Like I knew this was the direction I was going in. I do love to like highlighting those facts. I'm somebody who's like called myself a recovering perfectionist, and I've always
Yeah.
had this like fear of failure, right? And
Yeah,
I love that in your story, it's like, well, I tried to get a job as a sommelier. I couldn't get hired, and so like I pivoted. And
for
how
sure.
lovely that you pivoted and now you like if it wouldn't have been for that, which you could consider a failure, but is just more of a pivot. But without that, we wouldn't have Esja wines, which I really do enjoy these very much. And I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad that it didn't work out in that way so you could go do this.
For sure. And I think it definitely is a better fit. I mean, I appreciate Psalms. I love restaurants. I don't know if that's the path I really wanted to keep going with my life. I mean, I love being outside. I like working with my hands. I like working and I like having a product at the end of the day that like shows for that. So, yeah, it definitely works out. I mean, it didn't really feel like it at the time. It felt very unknown and intimidating and there's just so many different walks of life that come into this industry. Either people are like very, very experienced, come from a long line of winemakers in their family, or people kind of just start one day.
Yeah, it is.
I
It's
was one of
funny.
the
It's
people that
either
just
side,
started.
right? And you're just
Yeah,
like, I just did
exactly.
it and
Exactly.
it worked. It happened. Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, what are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. Now, let's get back to the show. Well, I'm curious. So, I want to dive into your wines, but first, the name of your winery is Esja. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Esja. Just the J just
Esja.
is a Y.
Okay, perfect. It's named after Esja Mountain in Iceland, and that's where your family is from, right? Is there any like
Mhm.
Icelandic culture influence over your winery in any ways, or what was kind of what drew you to that?
You know, I wanted the label to just kind of be about something about my heritage. I mean, just kind of, especially over here in Woodinville, it's like you don't have like a site or a place to name your wine after. I didn't want to name it after myself. Just wanted to make it after that heritage and like selfishly have an excuse to maybe continue to go back to Iceland and have a reason and like possibly sell my wines there. I don't know if being Icelandic directly influences how I make my wine, but I will say that the culture is definitely like a get it done, figure it out kind of culture. And especially like being the daughter of immigrants, you got to figure stuff out. And so that's a lot of winemaking. And especially like my situation where I'm making my wine now, it's like you just get it done, you figure it out, you kind of just have to have some grit. And I mean, if you look at the island of Iceland, it's like a pretty rough island to live on. Somehow people have been living there for thousands of years and survived. So I guess in that aspect, you learn to be tough and you learn to get things done, which is a lot of winemaking. It's not an easy job, and it is kind of a lot of bullshit to get through. And I think that has sort of helped me in a way. But yeah, I wouldn't say it really like necessarily influences my style of wine, but definitely feel like I grew up in a sort of tough environment that like has helped me get through this.
Sounds like you're a lot like a grapevine, right? You're like you thrive in the difficult environments.
Right,
Like that's what
exactly.
you need. You're like, no,
Yeah.
don't make it easy on me. Come on, I gotta
No.
dig into this.
Exactly. That's just what makes the best gems right there.
Exactly. I love it. So, talking about your style of wine, I want to give you a chance to kind of describe your wines. Do you take inspiration from any other style? Do you have a certain goal in mind? Like, how would you kind of overall describe the style of Essia wines?
I would definitely say I'm trying to make a lighter bodied, more direct, more focused kind of wines. Like I would say typical Washington wines are like very big, very bold, a lot of flavor, have a lot of punch. And, I mean, I started my career in Oregon, so my palate was very tuned to Pinot. So I had a very delicate palate. And coming back to Washington was a little bit of a change. I was definitely kind of shocked. It's changed now. It takes practice to learn new things and develop different tastes and stuff like that. So I would definitely say like I err on the side of like a light touch and low alcohol, higher acidity, a little bit more like delicate and softer tannins, like something that is just a little bit more refreshing and bright and kind of chuggable is what I like to say, is something that you kind of want to go back and have another glass. Like it doesn't fatigue your palate. It is something that you just have a glass of and you want to finish the bottle is the goal.
Oh, I love that. I love that you like call it chuggable. I feel like there'd be
Yeah.
winemakers that would like avoid that term. They're like, no, it's fancy, and it's dainty. It's like it can be dainty, but it can also be like, I really love this. Keep giving me another glass of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't want them to be intimidating. I definitely think there is complexity and like a lot of nuances in my wine, but I do like to talk about the fact that, like, yeah, I'm selling it for you to drink. I want you to open it. I want you to drink it. I want you to enjoy it. Sure, save them if you want to, but open them. That's the goal. Like, open them, have fun. Like, it's not supposed to be anything pretentious or intimidating. I just want them to be enjoyed and for you to drink them.
Yeah. What a great concept for wine, right? It's like it's really is truly meant to be drank.
Right,
You don't need
exactly.
to go further than
Exactly.
that.
Like I'm definitely a wine snob. I will admit that, but I do open my bottles of wine and I drink them. That's what they're meant to be, there to be enjoyed and not thought about sometimes.
I like it. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Esja has been referred to as a micro winery. And I feel like
Hmm.
that's a term many folks have maybe heard, but don't necessarily know what that means. So can you kind of talk to us about what is a micro winery and then maybe what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just looked it up on the internet 5 minutes ago to see what like the true definition
Sure.
was, and it said that a micro winery is a winery that produces less than 10,000 cases, which on this side, I mean, in Woodinville, like 10,000 cases is a pretty big winery.
Yeah.
So right now I am making about 750. In the grand scheme of things, that is tiny. For me, it seems huge and a lot and big. But yeah, I think a micro winery is just someone that's producing a small amount of wine, probably only has one person working there, one person doing everything, the social media, delivering the wine to your front door when you order it, and the one shipping it out. They're kind of running everything. And so basically, I think it's just like a person that's just pulling themselves up from the bootstraps and making some wine and making it work.
Yeah.
That's just what it is to me. It's just a person that's passionate about their wine, and either they're keeping it at that size or they're working to grow it, but they just have a little bit of wine that they're making and it's pretty damn good and they're getting it out the door themselves.
I like it. That was one thing I was going to ask you about because I feel like that relates to me. And like I've created this small business, but I also work like a full-time job on the side. I call that's my side job. This is my job.
Yes.
But I feel like it kind of relates. I often get the question of like, well, do you one day want to grow your business so that it can be your full-time gig and it can be this big thing? And I'm curious on like one, your opinion on what you would like to see for Essia wines. And then if you've had conversations with other micro wineries, do you think it's commonly a goal to want to grow bigger, or is there like a desire to stay at that small size and remain in the kind of like that micro winery stage?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a charm to being small. You can more easily put your hands on the wine, like you can monitor things better as you grow. It definitely gets harder to keep that quality. But I do think that most micro wineries would love to make a living off of their winery one day. It's a lot of work to not be paid for. Like, it is a passion, but it is also a job. I think it is something people would like to find like a sweet spot of like, how can I enjoy my life, make the money that would allow me to do that, but also like keep my operation at a point where I can handle it and I'm not too stressed out, and where I can produce really good wines on a smaller scale, I suppose. But my goal would be to grow the winery in order to make some more wines, like get some more distribution. It feels like every year I'm like dipping my toes into something different. So trying not to get too in over my head, because it's hard. You can get excited and make a lot of wine, and making the wine is the easy part, especially for me. But the rest of the business is definitely hard. Marketing and selling and stuff like that, especially when you're just one person.
Yeah. It's so funny because I know on one side that like making wine is hard to do. But when you compare it, I've heard it from many winemakers before where they're like, yeah, like sure, that's hard. And we're relying on Mother Nature and you have all these elements to it, but making the wine, it's like that's what we do, right? And then the
Yeah.
hard part is you have the wine and you have to sell the wine, right? And like that's the next step. And I'm curious, what are the areas as a winemaker that you look at for growth? Is it getting on restaurant wine lists? Is it growing a wine club? What are some things that you look at as like ways to grow as a winery?
This is something, I just kind of talk about like Woodinville's full of tiny wineries and everyone ultimately has a tasting room. So there's that. Direct to consumer helps a lot, which is something I don't currently have. I do on my site, but it's small and people buy it, but I've chosen the route of distribution. So Crew Selections distributes my wine and they do a fantastic job. They're kind of a champion of smaller producers, which is amazing because I make a small amount of wine and a lot of distributors would look at that and be like, it's too little. We don't know what to do with that, but they really do value small winemakers and they want to show that side of Washington and stuff like that. So that's helped me a lot with, being able to make more wines, like slowly kind of just up my production. It is hard to get out there and distribute everything yourself, especially if you don't have a tasting room. So I don't know. I don't really know what the magical answer is to that. And it kind of seems like nobody knows that. I would say having some diversity, have a distribution room direct to consumer, but it's something I'm still learning. I wouldn't say I'm a salesperson, a business person whatsoever at all, but finding ways to just connect with people and connect with distributors and restaurants and stuff like that, making friends. I've had plenty of friends that are SOMs that have been fantastic about getting my name out there. So that's been awesome to see, which is cool. Like people are like, I love you, I love your wines. And you're like, awesome. That makes me feel good. And then they
Right?
just tell their friends and their friends reach out to you. So kind of just putting yourself out there and not being embarrassed and being okay with people saying no. But then you also get the times with people that are like, your wines are awesome. Like, I'm going to tell my friends about it. So I don't know. I'm still kind of flying by the seat of my pants on that one too. So.
I mean, yeah, I think obviously if there was a magic answer, everybody would do it, right? That would be like the route
Mhm.
you take. You're like, great, I would obviously do this and then this. But I do like that. Like, I think a lot of it does come down to just like making, like you said, like making those connections, finding the people who will like champion for you because you, as the sole person of Esja Wine, can't do everything, right? If you can create a community that, can help you out and do some of those things and help you grow, that's one of the biggest things that I love doing as a wine enthusiast and an educator is like the nice thing is I'm never tied to just one winery. I don't have to sell just one wine for all of my tastings and all the things I do. I get to shout out all of the wineries
Yeah.
that I love. And I love that there's not a sense of competition either. I mean, it was another winemaker that sent me to you
Hmm.
and said, "Oh, you're here, go try SEO wines. Like they're down there. I think you're going to love their wines and you should talk to them." And I love that atmosphere and instead of it seeing as like competition, y'all just like love working together. And I mean, obviously I'm sure there are some outliers that are a little difficult, but for the most part, winemakers know how hard it is and they like want nothing more than
Yeah.
to like champion each other.
No, definitely. And that's how I've done a lot of things with what I'm doing is had friends recommended me for the distributor that I'm with. And so they picked me up. Like Mary at Damsel brought me to, some wine shops and says, all right, you're coming with me along on a sales day. Like bring some wines, they'll buy on the spot. So it's like definitely people help you out and lift you up and stuff like that. So it's a great community to be a part of, especially in Woodinville. We have our little women in wine happy hours and stuff like that. We just make connections with each other and help each other out and recommend each other to people we know that would buy their wines. It's great.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice. It's
Yeah.
helpful. It's nice to not feel alone.
Yeah, no, it is. It is so lonely as a small business, right? I
Yeah.
can connect with that as well. It's like when you find those people. So I have to ask one last question on the micro winery side of things. I saw on Instagram that you recently decided to move out of a shared space that you were using and into your garage. What has that been like?
Yeah. So the garage has been It's been cool. It is really nice to have my wine at home. I was making my wine at my previous employer at Darby, and it was just the point in my career where it was time for me to just take a step back and focus on myself for a second and just like take a beat. Harvest is really hard, and I was like starting my own wine label. So just wanted a little bit more time for myself. And for me, I was lucky enough, like I have a garage and you are able to bond that as a winery. It is 500 square feet and I'm making 750 cases out of that space. So put that in perspective, I got like 24 barrels and 4 tanks. I've got a little press and a little stemmer, but last year was the first year that I did everything in there. So like harvest to like barreling down, bottling, stuff like that. And it's worked. Before I did it, I kind of poked around. There's like Snoqualmie Valley, there's other wineries that are doing the same thing. So just kind of checked some other places out, saw the equipment that they were using, kind of asked some questions. I started off making wine in a very large scale winery. So I've always been used to like having a forklift, having multiple presses, having like enough power to run all that stuff. But I like to say it feels like a working sabbatical. It's still small enough to where like I'm not working crazy hours, like harvest almost 12 to 14 hours a day and stuff like that, which is insane. But I just borrowed a truck and a trailer from my dad. I'll go pick up the fruit on my own in Yakima, haul it over, back the trailer up into my house, which was a learning experience on their own. I am terrible at a trailer, but I get it done. My husband helps me out, usually kind of schedule for weekends, and we would just kind of open a bottle of bubbles and have a good day shoveling fruit into a destemmer, and everything's done by hand. Processing 2 tons would take probably 10 times longer to process in my garage than it would in like an actual functioning winery, but I'm only doing my stuff. And at the end of the day, it's like my wine and my space. And I get to take a break and have lunch inside my own kitchen, which is pretty awesome.
It's like the convenience makes up for the additional effort, and then like the ownership over it. I'm sure it feels nice to be like, this is my winery. Sure, it's my garage, but it's
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
winery.
Yeah, exactly. We do have like a joke where it's like, my husband will be like, oh, I got to go get something from the garage. I'm like, you mean the winery? You mean the winery. But
Really, you.
exactly. But no, it's been good. Obviously, it doesn't really allow for any sort of huge leaps in growth, but I'm not really looking for that now. But maybe eventually, hopefully, find a spot to share with somebody and have a place to rent out with, some proper equipment. My equipment's proper, but the basket press is super fun. I love it. I've never used a basket press before, but blow the stemmer.
Is a basket press different than like a press you might see in like a larger winery? Can you like, I know we don't have like pictures, but like, can you give like an explanation of kind of how it works?
Sure. So definitely larger wineries would have a basket press, but it's not manual. Like mine is one of the old school things that you would see in someone's yard in Italy, where there is like a wooden basket around it, and you're just cranking down like a pneumatic head, and it presses the fruit down. But I've always been used to using a bladder press, which is essentially it's like a big. I guess you'd say it's like a tube. You fill the press, and then like you close the doors, and kind of like a washing machine where you just pick the cycle and then it will just run for 2 hours. You still have to watch the press fan and like drain that and stuff like that. But it basically does everything for you. You can kind of set it and forget it kind of thing and walk away. But with mine, it's like you're kind of there. You're hand cranking it down. I have like a little bucket to catch the wine after it's being pressed, and I like pump it into the barrels. But yeah, it takes a little bit more manual labor to do so. And then you got to pull it apart. It's a lot smaller, so you got to fill it up a few more times. But it's very cute. It's very charming. It's very fun.
I feel like it's like rewarding too. Like you feel like I really put the effort into that one.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I'm very accustomed to being tired and working hard, but it is kind of cool. Like, yeah, I mean, I went and grabbed these grapes by myself in Yakima, hauled them over, backed the trailer up to my house. Every grape has been touched by my hands at least 10 times, like through this process. So, so yeah,
Dang.
it's cool.
Yeah. Oh, so fun. I love it. So the next question, this one's kind of honestly, it's probably a little cheesy to ask, but I just have to ask since you're in wine and winemaking. So I saw on your socials that you're pregnant. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I've heard that in pregnancy you have a heightened sense of smell, or your sense of smell is heightened. One, have you noticed that? Is that purely just a rumor, and has it like helped or hindered the winemaking process at all for you? This podcast is sponsored by VoChill. When you're enjoying a glass of wine, temperature matters, and you don't need to be a wine expert to know this. You know this the minute you realize you forgot to put the bottle of wine in the fridge, and now you're stuck with lukewarm Sauvignon Blanc that is the opposite of refreshing. You know adding ice cubes will just water the wine down, but it seems like it's your only option. Not anymore. I want to introduce you to one of my favorite wine gadgets, VoChill. This gadget is as simple as it is elegant. It will keep wine perfectly chilled in your own wine glass. No more clunky metal or plastic tumblers or ice in your wine. While this gadget is an absolute must during the summer months, I don't enjoy wine without it from June to September. It's also incredibly useful for those days when you're craving a glass of white or rosé, but you don't want to wait for the bottle to chill in the fridge. VoChill offers a stemmed and stemless chiller in multiple colors, so you're bound to find one that's perfect for you. They also make the perfect gift. I should know, I got one for my mom at Christmas a couple years ago, and she loves it. Head to vochill.com, that's VOCHILL.com, to get your perfect wine chiller, and don't forget to use code CORKANDFIZZ for 15% off your order. This podcast is sponsored by the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club. Interested in trying new wines, but not sure where to start? Or maybe you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you love the idea of tasting wine live with me. If that's you, come join my Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club, and you'll get to sip wine with me twice a month while I help you find new favorite wines. The Cork Crew is not your ordinary wine club. This is a community of people who are passionate about exploring new flavors, learning about different wine styles, and having fun along the way. And the best part about this club, purchasing the wine is completely optional. Plus, all events are recorded, and you have access to the full library of recordings as a Cork Crew member, so you can always catch up if you can't make it live. Oh, and did I mention it's virtual, which means you get to do all of this from the comfort of your sofa in your PJs. No need to worry about driving in crappy traffic, finding a designated driver, or spending an arm and a leg on a taxi. Want to give it a try without the commitment? You're in luck. Right now, I'm offering a free class pass to anybody who wants to try out the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Tasting Club. With this pass, you'll be able to join a Cork Crew event of your choosing. No strings attached. I don't need your credit card. I don't need you to sign up for anything. You'll be my guest. Simply head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to get your class pass and be one step closer to becoming a member of the best wine tasting club around, the Cork Crew. I can't wait to see you there. Now let's get back to the show.
I would definitely say yes, heightened smell is a thing. I've always had like very sensitive sense of smell, but like I don't know if it really helps in any way that's beneficial to me. More that like I can like smell something from a mile away versus like any sort of nuances, like in wine or whatever. But for sure, it feels like you're kind of like a dog or something. It's like, what, like, how do I smell this already?
Yeah.
But no, it fortunately hasn't helped me become like a super taster or anything like that. So I know, right?
Right? You're like, oh, I could smell it from farther away, but no, I wanted to actually smell more in the
Right,
wine.
exactly, exactly. Maybe it's just a little more overwhelming. There's like so much coming at your face at one time. But yeah, it changes your senses a bit for sure.
Yeah. Oh, funny. I just had to ask. I'm like, it's always
Yeah.
something that I've like thought about and been like, I wonder if it doesn't help at all. But all right, let's dive into. So we talked a little bit about the grapes you work with, and they're a little different, I feel like, for Washington. I think a lot of people think of like Cabernet Sauvignon and Riesling and maybe Syrah for Washington. But I know on the website, so right now you've got a Cabernet Franc, which is what I have in the glass. So we'll have to talk about that in depth a little bit more. But you've got also Sangiovese and Grenache and Roussanne. How do you choose which grapes to work with? Is it like that these are ones that you are wanting to make wine out of? Is it what's available? Is it a combination of those two? Yeah, how do you choose?
Definitely say a combination of the two. At first, like we've talked about before, I came from Oregon, it's primarily Pinot, just kind of coming from that even too, like, and then coming to Washington where there's like dozens of varietals that people work with, like, whereas in like Oregon, it's like four. So kind of just was working and just found myself gravitating towards Grenache all the time. Like it just always seemed so floral, so beautiful, so lovely, lighter bodied. It is like people do like to compare it and be say like, yeah, this is the Pinot of Washington. But I just liked the diversity of that. So I had the opportunity to make some wine at Darby Winery. He actually gave me a few tons of fruit as a bonus to start my own label, which was very nice, very awesome. Was definitely the reason why I started making my own wine. But so I got to just kind of pick from whatever we had in the winery and whatever fruit look we were getting. So wanted a red, I wanted a white. The Grenache definitely I wanted to make, and then just kind of landed on Roussanne just because it was like one of my options. And the more I make the Roussanne, I like it more and more. So it is much like a Chardonnay where it's just so like the winemaking styles can be so diverse, and like where it's grown is so diverse and it's cool. I mean, at first I was just like, I'm not so sure about this, and like just starting to like it more and more and more the more I start to work with it. So that's been kind of cool to like see that development. But the Grenache was kind of more like I love this. I want to make this. I will make sure that I make this. But I would say for like those two, I've kept consistent. And then in 2022, I went out and found all my own contracts. And it's difficult as like a new person finding their own contracts to like get what they want and get what they like. And the smaller, cooler things are already taken up. Like Grenache was very hard to find. I ended up landing on like a very fun, cool vineyard that I love. But the Roussanne was hard to find. But I just saw what was available, and Cab Franc was. And I've always loved Cab Franc. I wanted to make that in like a fun, lighter style, like more like a Loire style. And so I was like, this will be an awesome opportunity. I didn't want to keep myself in a box where it was like, oh, I only make Rhone varietals, or like I only make Bordeaux. Like it is kind of maybe overused, but I do like to just make the things that I like to drink. So
There's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, for
I think
sure.
that's good.
I feel like I have to make wines that I like and make me happy in order to like be able to make them well.
Well, and I feel like that's like one of the benefits of Washington, of like you said, like when you come from Oregon, where like Oregon is like Pinot Noir country. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you can go outside of Willamette Valley, and even in Willamette Valley, you'll find a few other things, but it's Pinot Noir. Like that's what you like,
Yes.
you're known for. And you're like, if you're a winery in Willamette Valley, you're making Pinot Noir, right? Like
Yes.
it's just like a given. And I like that in Washington, I think there isn't necessarily a wine yet that you're expected to make.
No.
And it kind
No.
of gives you that freedom to try different things. And I'm curious, so you said you mentioned that like sounds like Grenache and Roussanne might be like ones that you're always going to aim to make. Do you think you'll keep switching
Mm-hmm.
things up, or are there other wines that you're hoping to make? Like, would you one day want to have like these are the staples of Esja wines, or would you prefer that like every year you kind of switch things up?
Yeah, definitely working on having some staples. I mean, especially when you're small and you're getting your contracts in place and stuff like that. Like, your vineyards will change or whatever. Like maybe you need to change stuff up. But definitely the Roussanne, Grenache, the Cab Franc will definitely be a staple. I've been making an orange wine, which has been fun. It's funky, it's fun. People love it or hate it, but like it's been pretty successful. But like I said, I like making fun, funky wines that are like chuggable and easy to drink. So I think those four at least will be the staples for now. You do get presented with these opportunities and you're like, yeah, I would love to do that. But at some point, you're in over your head. There's so many and all this stuff. I'm the kind of person that likes a lot of things. So it's hard to narrow them down. So I'm trying to keep myself restrained a little bit.
It's a good call. I mean, I could imagine how hard that would be when you're like, how about like a vineyard comes to you, like, we have this, and it, our person
Yeah.
backed out, so we have it to you at this price, and you're like, I want to, but also already things in the press, or like I've already like
Right.
got like the things lined up for my the
Yeah.
winery.
Yeah. Exactly. It's really hard. definitely last year during harvest, people had some extra stuff that were really fun, really cool. I would have loved to have them. And also like grapes like Gamay. Like I love Gamay from the gorge. Like somebody had some extra and I was like, that would be my dream, but I'm not doing that right now. So you kind of have to learn to say no and keep yourself in line a little bit. But yeah, there's plenty of things I would love to make, but so far just sticking with the essentials that I have right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Well, let's talk about one of those essentials. So I have this is the 2022 Cabernet Franc from Rattlesnake Hills, and specifically from there's a vineyard. There it is, Deneen Vineyard.
Hmm.
So you just
Yeah.
want to tell me a little bit about, tell me about the grapes, tell me about the winemaking. I'll do a little tasting while you tell me about it.
Yeah, this is the first year that I made a Cab Franc for myself. I do think Washington can grow Cab Franc pretty amazing. And I wish more people would not be so scared of it. I think it is like kind of a subject that people try to steer away from. I've always loved like Cab Franc from the Loire, just a lighter, more direct, more focused Cab Franc. I mean, I don't have any new barrels, so everything goes into neutral French oak.
So Cab Franc to me, one of the first things I think of is like the pyrazines, the green bell pepper. And I feel like that's what either makes people avoid it or what draws people to it. How would you describe like using those pyrazines in your style? Do you try to amplify? Do you try to like work with them? How would you do that?
So I am one of those people that I don't mind pyrazines, and I think that's what makes it unique, what makes it different. So I wouldn't say I'm like looking to like amplify it by any means, but like if it's there, then it's there. I don't think it's a problem. Like that is Cab Franc, but Deneen Vineyard is pretty cool. I mean, there seems to be very little pyrazine aspect to these wines. Like there's enough there that you can recognize that it is Cab Franc, but it does have this very juicy, jammy nose. Like it has like all these like fruity components to it. But I think the vineyard does super well for Cab Franc just because everything that I've worked with from the vineyard is just kind of falls into itself so nicely. Like the tannins are very well rounded and super integrated and nice. And you do get a lot of acid. Like that's just kind of one things that I look for. I like to pick early so I can retain some acidity, like keep that freshness, keep the alcohol low. I kind of went a little bit in between like what I would do or like what standard Washington like winemaking style is. Like Cab Franc would probably normally be picked a little later. So I kind of like did a little test run and picked in between, and it turned out lovely. And I think it's super nice. I've gotten some great feedback on the Cab Franc. So I kind of pushed those boundaries the next year of picking decisions and just picked it even earlier. I'm like, all right, I
Ooh.
think this vineyard lends super well to the style that I'm trying to do. So yeah, like I am super happy with it. I'm excited to continue working with the Cab Franc and like making more, but it's just super nice. I just feel like I can make the wine how I want to make it and not have to force it, you know?
Yeah, like kind of like they did the work in the vineyard, or like I've heard that like it's really is about the grapes, right?
For sure.
You're basically like shepherding the grapes as
Yeah.
the winemaker and bringing them in. I would say, yeah, I think this is lovely. I think the way you described it as like you do get a little of the pyrazines. It's very funny. When I first started drinking Cabernet Franc or when I first started drinking wine, just in general, I did not like pyrazines. And
Yeah.
so I would avoid like the, Loire Valley style Cabernet Franc. And I don't know what it was that changed. And now I kind of lean into that a little bit more. And I like that kind of earthy, slightly vegetal, note to it. But I like you said, it is, I think you get it more on the aromatics. It is like surrounded by this like really nice, like cherry, bright, fruity notes to it. And honestly, if this had been given to me blind, I'd like to believe I could think it was a Cab Franc. But if you told me it was Cab Franc, I would have said it was from Oregon because I think it does have that like that in between style of like it's not as acidic as like a Loire Valley style or as
Hmm.
green, but it's not like I think in Washington we tend to make a really, really fruity style of this. And I think you're right in between. I'm very curious. I'll have to keep an eye on for your next vintage of this to see how that, differs, picking it a little earlier. I just had this out because it's been a little bit cooler, so I didn't really feel the need to like store it anywhere. So I'm probably having it about like 65 degrees. I kind of want to put it in the fridge and like drop the temperature a little bit and have it like slightly chilled. And I feel like I would really, really like that as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I feel like it's definitely lean enough to have a slight chill on it and enjoy it like on a summer day as well.
Yeah, I think it'd be really good. I'm thinking about bringing it. I'm going to a dinner tonight with some friends. We're going to do a dinner up on their rooftop. I'm like, we're having a grilled like chicken and steak kebabs. I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like this could go really well,
Yeah.
really well with that. I like it. So for just while we're talking about the wines, and we'll get to kind of the last little bits here, but I just wanted to highlight for folks that want to try the wines, do you ship outside of Washington?
Yeah. So I use Vino Shipper, and so there's most states I can ship directly to.
Cool. Awesome. So you can head to the Esja website, which it's Esja Wine, so ESJA wines.com. And Tanya is sharing a 10% off code for folks if you want to give any of her wines a try. All of them look delicious. I love an orange wine. I also love Roussanne. Like I'm a sucker for, I think it's honestly like, I love Chardonnay too, but I'm like, ooh, Roussanne's just like a little more exciting.
Yeah.
But the discount code for 10% off is CorkFizz24 for folks if you want to give her wine a try. I'd highly recommend. I think they're really great, food friendly, or just like you said, like chuggable. Like these are the ones that like you just like have friends over and you want to grab a bottle to share with everybody. This would be like a bottle to grab.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So we kind of talked about like wines that you haven't had a chance to make yet. We talked about Gamay. Are there any other wines that like are at the top of your list that like the first opportunity that you can make them, you would reach for them?
My first love's Pinot. That's just there, but I would love to make that, but I don't know if I want to just like keep that in my mind as something that is I like to enjoy instead of like work with, but I wouldn't mind making a very bomb Pinot Noir. I think that would be very cool. I don't know where from.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask them like, would you try for a Washington or would you get Oregon grapes?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Gorge. So, like, the Gorge is Washington. I think the Pinots are very wild and cool and energetic and stuff like that coming from the Gorge. So, that would be something fun to do. Always love Gamay. That's like kind of along the ways of like a Pinot. But for me, I mean, also like people always like ask you, especially in like the Somm community, like what was like your wine that made it like click for you? Like what made it sound? And for me, that was just in general was like Riesling. I thought it was very cool and like it's kind of typical of an industry person to love Riesling. I mean, it just kind of encompasses so much stuff. It's got these crazy aromatics, like so many different styles. They can be bone dry, they can be a dessert wine, they can do this. So Riesling is always super fun and super cool in my mind and would be cool to maybe dip my toes in, but we will see. We will see.
I love it. I just love asking that question because I feel like it's a fun one, like for you to kind of like think about where you'd like to go or what is it that like is on your bucket list of wines to make, so to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we've made it to the end, which is my little speed round that I call it. And I call it a speed round not because like I'm going to ask you like super, super fast and you got to be like ready to go. It's more like these questions are ones you could spend a very long time on. So we're not looking for like the perfect answer. We're mainly looking for like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Just as like, I think these are fun for
Yeah.
folks to hear for folks in the wine community. So we're starting off with what is your favorite wine at the moment? I'd never be crazy enough to just ask you your favorite wine. So what is your favorite wine at the moment?
At the moment, I would say maybe not one wine, but a producer that we just signed up for their club, but like Day Wines, I always enjoy. We just actually got one of her shipments in and I just think her wines are always very cool. Like she has like really funky fun stuff, but also some serious awesome Pinots and she's kind of pushing the boundaries of like what people can do in Oregon, which I think is super awesome. So I definitely like love trying her new stuff and seeing what she's doing. And it's also a little bit inspirational for me. Like, I do think she toes the line of funky, fun, cool, and also very lovely, well made, great classic style wines. So I would say that's like been on my radar more as of late. I mean, obviously, right now I'm not super delved into the drinking of wine world at
Fair,
the moment.
fair.
Yeah.
Great point.
That's a different conversation in itself, but we're surviving it. But yeah, I do just drink very local. I go through waves of drinking local, drinking things like from different spots. But right now we're kind of on an Oregon kick, maybe.
I like it. I like that description. I didn't even think about it. Like, of course, at the moment, you're like, I'm like sipping and spitting wines. But
Yeah,
at the
exactly.
moment, I'm looking forward to having wine.
For sure, for sure. Definitely looking forward to being able to just drink
Yeah.
whatever wines I would like.
Okay, so how about we'll move into region. So what is a favorite wine region that you've ever visited?
So one of my favorites is Okanagan in Canada. I just think it is just so fun, so cool. Again, just very diverse in like what they make. There is areas where it's just like Pinot and Riesling, but then you go a little farther south and it's bigger, bolder reds. And like, I don't know, I just love the area. Love the wines that they're making. They just like seem so like raw and energetic and cool. And it's beautiful up there.
I have somebody I follow on Instagram who's in the Okanagan, and like I'm so glad you highlighted out the Okanagan in Canada because like that's on my list right now of places I need to get to.
It's one of my favorites. I mean, the few times I've been there, I was like, there's so many amazing places in the world, but I would move here. I would move here right now if we had like if we could, if there was just someone just like an opportunity. Like, why not?
Right.
I think it's just really cool. Their wines are amazing. They're very affordable. It is lovely to get Pinot at
Yeah.
a price that is affordable. I mean, Pinot is usually higher end, which it deserves to be, but it is nice to be able to like buy a case and not feel guilty.
Right, right. No, I agree. I think it'd be fun. And it's so hard to get Canadian wine outside of
Mhm.
Canada. So like it's kind of one of those regions where like I think you'd go there and you'd be like, "Whoa, I didn't even know that like most of this existed," right?
Oh yeah, no, it's amazing. Like there's just so much high quality wine coming out of there, and like you just don't get to enjoy it in the US.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely need to get a trip up there. So now on the flip side, what is a wine region you would like to visit that you haven't had a chance to?
I would like to visit Alsace. I just feel like it's such a cool area in France in general. Like, like even outside of the wine aspect, like it just seems such like a little like blend of cultures and stuff like that. Always been like interested in Germany and France and stuff like that, but also like kind of lends towards like the wines that I like to drink. And I think it is a very cool wine region. But I would
Yeah.
love, I mean, I would go anywhere in France to any wine region in France, I think, and I would be perfectly happy. But Alsace, I feel like, would be one of those ones where I would fit in.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. We're planning a trip to France this September, and it was really hard. I don't think Alsace is making the itinerary just because we have limited time, but
Hmm.
that one hurt my heart a little bit that it wasn't
Oh
gonna
yeah, I mean
make
it's like
it.
you probably need to schedule a month so you can just hit every single wine region.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Okay, now let's move into so again, this is probably one maybe you haven't been having, but go back into the past mind. What's like a favorite wine and food pairing that you've enjoyed that you'd recommend?
Favorite wine and food pairing. I'm always like a sucker for like gamay and a hot dog.
Oh, I like that matchup. Heck
Like
yeah.
a decadent hot dog with like cream cheese and sriracha and all, like the toppings. But I would say that definitely. What else? There's always like the classics like champagne and oysters.
I mean, it should be towards the top, but like, come on, how often do you have oysters and how often do you have a hot dog? I mean,
I know, right? Exactly. Exactly. I do kind of like pairing wines with things like a hot dog like typically would be drank maybe with like a Rainier, which is fantastic. Like I love my like a Rainier, but just having some maybe elevated junk food with like a good tasty wine is just kind of one of my favorite things in my mind, especially during harvest when you've got some like hardcore cellar work going on and you just like want to eat something like decadent and then you pair it with a wine and you're like, this just feels fantastic.
yes,
This feels
I
great.
love that. I think that's so fun. You don't have to be fancy to enjoy your wine and food pairing for sure. It's similar to like one of my favorite things to teach people is like when I'm teaching wine and food pairing, I think a lot of people expect it to be like this fancy dinner or things like that. I'm like, no, I want you to just grab stuff around your house that represent these different food groups. And like one of the favorites is like the flaming hot Cheetos and like
Oh
having
yeah.
that be like a representation of spicy and try that with like an off dry or sweet style of Riesling or
Yeah.
Gewürztraminer and like seeing what that's like. And it's like, that could be an amazing pairing.
Oh, definitely. For some reason it just like feels good to wash it down with a nice sweet wine or something like that. And also like something I feel like that is looked over is also desserts. I love just like a dessert wine. Always one of my favorite things. Like I don't even care what it is, but like just having someone put the effort into like pairing a wine with a dessert, it just is amazing. And it's awesome. And it's something you don't get to experience often, but I feel like it's definitely overlooked. But I love dessert wines. I think they're so good and so tasty. And like once they're like paired up with even something simple as an apple pie or something with ice cream and like pair it with like a sauternes,
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. All right. So our last question, I'm actually changing this up for the first time on the podcast. I usually ask about like your favorite bottle under $15, but I'm starting to kind of like move away from that because I want to highlight more like I know it's hard to get a bottle under $15 if you're a small producer, and if we're looking at sustainability, that, you know, adding all of that in kind of means that you're going to pay a little bit more. So we're going to ask a different question. And again, this one I'm like, oh wow, actually maybe not. I shouldn't have asked this one. But what is like a wine that has surprised you? And I did have on the notes, I'm like lately, but I'm like, actually, Tanya, I'm going to just ask you for any time in your past. What was a wine that surprised you in some way?
I would say, I mean, I did work a harvest in New Zealand, and I would say that definitely made me feel better than everyone else with the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc for a second there. Like, it's one of those places where it is hard to find New Zealand wines in the US, especially high quality. But I had a bottle of Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc, and it was actually pretty good. And like, I was like, all right, okay, like I can stop being such an asshole about this. And it is not so bad. I will admit to that. So I would say that surprised me. I was like,
That's
that
funny.
definitely like,
Yeah, yeah. I love it. You're like, no, I've had good New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. I can't have any of this VM. And you're like, oh crap.
no,
It's
yeah,
actually pretty
I got
good.
humbled pretty quick with that one. I was like, why is this tasting so good right now? Like, I don't know. I don't know what happened, but it was great. I mean,
Yeah.
can't knock
Oh,
it.
I love it. Yep, you're like, it tastes good. What
Yeah.
can I say? And that's what wine
Yeah.
should do. It should taste good. And we did.
For sure.
Oh, so fun. All right. Well, we've made it to the end. Thank you so much, Tanya, for chatting with me and getting to learn more about your wine and your story in wine. And looking forward to having more people try this. Cabernet Franc is delicious. So we'll definitely be sharing with more folks.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
All right. Sounds good. Have a great rest of your weekend. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. As always, it would mean so much to me that if you enjoyed this episode, that you would rate it and maybe even leave a review if you have a chance. Also, if you know a wine lover in your life that would enjoy this and would enjoy learning about Esja wines, please share it with them. Now, I highly recommend trying Tanya's wines if you can. You can purchase them directly on her website. You can go to Esja Wines, that is ESJAWines.com. Use code CORKFIZZ, that's CORKFIZZ 24 for 10% off. And her bottles are really affordable. The wines are all between $20 to $33 a bottle. There's a great selection. Honestly, I would just like grab all 6 and give them a try. Like, why not? Make yourself half a case and support a small winemaker out here making some really delicious wines. The Cabernet Franc is wonderful, and I'm a sucker for Roussanne, so you know I'll be looking for that wine, and especially the orange version, to give it a try. Okay, in next week's episode, I'll be sharing my favorite chillable red wines. Now, what makes a red wine chillable? Guess you'll have to listen to find out. Thanks again for listening, and if you want to learn more about wine, come follow me at Cork and Fizz on Instagram. And if you're interested in exploring new wines and maybe even getting a chance to talk to winemakers like Tanya on Zoom during a live call, come join my virtual tasting club, the Cork Crew. Right now, you can join your first event absolutely free using a class pass. So head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to get yours today, and then you'll get an email that will allow you to sign up for any of my upcoming Cork Crew events. Cheers!